The Honourable Member for Laurier-Sainte-Marie. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on November 14th, I rose in this House and asked the Minister of Foreign Affairs why he had refused to export some arms to Thailand, citing human rights reasons, but he had approved the sale of arms to Saudi Arabia, despite the fact that the human rights situation there is even worse, if you can even imagine that. And also, he did this despite Saudi Arabia's actions in Yemen. I also asked him when he would agree to have a parliamentary committee studying this issue on an ongoing basis, this issue of the sale of Canadian arms to Saudi Arabia, particularly since the Liberal government promised us transparency. Now, I didn't get much of an answer. We all know that it's called question period for a reason. It's not answer period. But the minister announced his intention to look at this arms treaty. Since then, the government has continued to turn a blind eye to these calls for transparency. The situation in Yemen has become catastrophic. 2/3 of the population there require humanitarian assistance. And that means 19 million people, Mr. Speaker. And yet the government has remained silent on the issue. Furthermore, we learned that the Foreign Affairs Minister at the time had not been properly briefed on the human rights situation before he approved the sale of arms to Saudi Arabia. As for the arms trade treaty, well, I don't know if the bill is hidden somewhere in an office, but we haven't seen anything. We haven't seen any movement. So, my questions for the Minister of Foreign Affairs are as follows. Does she believe that Canadians, through this Parliament's work, have the right to transparency when it comes to the sale of Canadian arms? Has the Minister been properly briefed by the appropriate department about the human rights situation in Saudi Arabia? How does the Minister feel, as a woman, on this day, one day before International Women's Day, about the fact that we are selling arms to a regime that oppresses women in an absolutely terrible fashion? Does the Minister believe that Saudi Arabia violated human rights in Yemen? And if so, what does she intend to do about it? And when will we finally see a bill to have Canada accede to the arms trade treaty? Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Foreign Affairs Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And first of all, allow me to tell you how encouraging it is to see members in this House and all Canadians share an interest in this issue, in the high standards concerning peace, security, and human rights around the world.
Canada's export regime, all applications for permits to export controlled goods or technology are carefully reviewed against the full range of Canada's defence and foreign policy interests. The objective of this review is to ensure that exports from Canada do not cause harm to Canada or to our allies, do not undermine national or international security, do not contribute to regional conflicts or instability, do not contribute to the development of weapons of mass destruction or their means of delivery, that they are not used to commit violation of human rights, and that they are consistent with economic sanctions. Our controls are in line with those of our allies and of our partners. However, Mr. Speaker, we have heard the concerns of Canadians, and we are fully committed to making Canada's export control regime even stronger. On June 17, 2016, our government tabled the Arms Trade Treaty in the House of Commons, something that the previous Conservative government failed to do. Canada's accession to the Arms Trade Treaty will further enhance transparency in the export controls process while not putting Canadian companies at a commercial disadvantage. Let me remind the member and all Canadians that the Canadian defence industry provides 70,000 Canadian jobs. Canadians rightly deserve and expect a fair and level playing field. But Canadians also expect us to live up to our commitment to promote responsibility, transparency, and accountability. This is the right thing to do, and we will soon be introducing legislation to this regard. And when we do introduce the legislation, members of this House, including my colleague opposite, will have an opportunity to study, analyze, and contribute to this discussion. I look forward to hearing from the member opposite, as well as collaborating with her so that Canada can successfully accede to the Arms Trade Treaty. Furthermore, Canadians will soon see the results of new transparency measures that will be put in place in the form of enhancements to our annual reports to Parliament on the administration of the Export and Import Permits Act and on military exports from Canada. We committed to being more transparent and accountable, and we will deliver. With respect to the export contract of light armoured vehicles to Saudi Arabia, let me remind the House that this contract was signed under the Conservative government in February 2014, and that all three parties, including the NDP, committed during the 2015 election campaign to respect this contract, and to quote the leader of the NDP, and I quote, "You don't cancel a commercial accord retroactively, it's just not done," end of quote. Unlike the NDP, we are sticking to our word and honouring the contract, but will also further enhance transparency and accountability in this regard. Regarding Saudi Arabia's human rights record, are we passive? Absolutely not, Mr. Speaker. Our government takes every opportunity to raise critical issues with senior Saudi officials, like humanitarian issues, consular cases, and universal human rights. We have raised these issues directly with the King, the Crown Prince, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and other ministers of state, and the President of the Saudi Human Rights Commission. We will never shy away from the opportunity to promote human rights, both at home and abroad. Je remercie mon honorable collègue.
I would like to thank my honourable colleague for given me the opportunity to highlight what our government is doing.
Marie.
The Honourable Member for Laurier-Sainte-Marie. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My colleague says that the contract had been signed by the Conservatives, but we didn't know at the time, and we were told by the Liberals it's done. This matter is set, and yet it was the Liberals that approved the export permit, which is a crucial component. The contract is not finalized until there is an export permit. It's not a Christmas ornament, that permit. It is a crucial step. And if we take that as something to be treated as secondary, well, we can't take this seriously. And all the fine rhetoric about higher standards for peace and human rights are nothing but empty rhetoric in this context. My colleague says that arms sales are carefully reviewed. If they are carefully reviewed, how is it that we found out through an access to information request that the minister was not even briefed? The parliamentary secretary. The contract was negotiated by the former government, and we all know that the NDP had strongly supported this contract.
Our government is delivering on our campaign commitment to join the Arms Trade Treaty, which will increase transparency and accountability in regulating the global trade of arms. We all know that this is the right thing to do, and as we move forward on this commitment, I look forward to an open and rigorous debate in the House with colleagues from all parties, including my honourable colleague opposite.
When it comes to human rights, our government clearly outlined our position on human rights. They are an integral part of our foreign policy because they are an integral part of who we are as Canadians. Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak